Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to Development Discourse, where we ideate for Africa's development. I'm Patrick Okigbo, the founding partner at Nextier. Nextier is a multi-competency advisory firm focused on solving Africa's complex development problems. Leadership or its failure is Africa's in my view, most fundamental development challenge. Extensive public opinion data from major Pan-African surveys consistently highlight poor leadership, weak governance, and associated issues like corruption as the top perceived barriers to progress, often ranking above economic or external factors. Corrupt, tribal, and self-serving governance has led to mismanagement of abundant natural resources, suppression of freedoms, and persistent political instability, rendering many African nations fragile and impoverished. As a result, widespread disillusionment has run deep in citizens who are becoming nostalgic about colonial or even military rule as more stable than some of the democratic governance that we have in the continent. My guest today, Dr. Charles Mensa, should have answers to many of these questions on how to navigate these challenges. He founded the Institute of Economic Affairs in Ghana almost 4 decades ago to broaden public policy debates, promote private sector-led economic growth, and strengthen democracy. He's a distinguished economist and business leader with decades of experience in corporate governance and economic policy. Dr. Mensa previously served as board chair of Barclays Bank Ghana, Accra Breweries, AB InBev, Fanmil Ghana, which is Danone, and several other private sector boards in international shipping, healthcare, hospitality. Dr. Mensa, welcome.
Thank you, Patrick. I look forward
You're
to
very
a
welcome.
good conversation.
So today's chat centers on the politics of progress, political stability, and Africa's development. To ensure that we're on the same page, Dr. Mensa, what does progress mean in the African context today? And how should we measure it beyond some of the traditional GDP metrics that we're used to?
Thank you, Patrick. I like to start. I mean, I understand what you want to do and what you want to talk about, which is the basic way of measuring progress has always been to look at the per capita GDP. Yes. And then from there, we can go into other issues like education, nutrition, health, and so on. But once let's go back, let's take the base. As an economist, let's take the base and say, I know Ghana well, so maybe let me use Ghana to start the story of West Africa. The average income, our GDP per capita here is about $2,000, $2,400 a year. That's what the World Bank tells us. That's what they tell us. That's not what we think, though. But even if we use that measure of $2,400 a year, if you divide it by 12, it means that it is $200 a month. And if you divide it by 30 days, then you're looking at about $6 a day. Now, this is what the international community is telling us, $6 a day. Now, who lives by $6 a day in our current environment? Who lives by that? It's almost impossible to live on $6 a day. And the truth of the matter is that it is even worse than that. So the question that arises is, how come after 58 years of independence, 68 years of independence, we are where we are? Why are we where we are? How come our classmates or our course mates in Singapore, in Malaysia, in South Korea, and other places are doing much better than us. And we might have even started ahead of them.
Exactly.
We might have started ahead of them. So these are some of these the issues that I think your program could help disseminate throughout this West Africa region for us to know exactly how to tackle this. My central theme here, Patrick, is that what they call independence, we never got it. We never got what others call independence. For most of us in West Africa, we were given, but we really didn't have it. The old condition, continued. Now, I know we don't want to dwell too much on the issue of a colony and colonization and so on, but nevertheless, it's been part of us. It's been part of our history. So many years of colonization, and then 68 years after that, people say, don't talk about colonialism. Forget about it. What is wrong with you? Well, the foundation is wrong. The foundation that was set up was wrong. You know, a colony does not belong to the people who live in it. It belongs to the colonizer. And the whole purpose of colonizing is to use your resources to develop the colonizers' resources. So we were set up in Ghana as a colony to produce cocoa for Europe, dig up the gold for Europe, dig up the diamonds for Europe, dig up manganese for Europe, sell our bauxite, and all that was done for the development of Europe. And then, come 1957, we're told, you are independent. So go on. Now, but the rules didn't change. That's why I say that we got a Trojan horse for independence, because the rules didn't change. The rules of engagement, the structure of the economy at the time didn't change. The political leaders were just happy with the word independence and freedom. But nothing changed. We were still farming for cocoa. We kept on farming for the European economy, particularly the UK. We kept on producing timber, cutting our lumber, shipping them to Europe. We kept on digging gold for export. Nothing really changed. So when people say we're poor, of course you are going to be poor. Who runs a colony and gets rich out of a colony?
Exactly.
Nobody does that. Who produces cocoa and gets rich? It's the value addition that gets you rich. But you're producing raw material, producing countries don't get rich. It's the people who do the value addition, they get rich.
And we will get into those. But something that I've always struggled with is if what we're measuring for is wrong, then ultimately we will be wrong. So if GDP per capita is not what we should be looking at as the primary indices for measuring progress, then maybe we should change that. And my question is, what in your view should we be measuring ourselves against? Should we be measuring our government against to see if we're making progress as a people?
I haven't thought about the kind of measure, the indicators to use.
Like maybe healthcare, education, something more social.
But those are measured. Those are measured. They're not new. UNICEF measures even how many places you have to go to ease yourself.
They
measure that. So those are not new measures, really. And I really don't think it is the measurement that is wrong. But I think that the output of our countries are fairly low in the formal sector. So for instance, let me give you an example. For instance, here we're told that we are a rich country, yet we keep on producing cocoa, but we have gold, we have bauxite, we have manganese, we have all that. Now, the production of these things and the income generated from these assets, I call them assets, do not accrue to the benefit of us. If you would throw all that in, we can say we'll be better off than what we are today.
Interesting. Okay, and I'm going to get to the productivity question, but just to think about some of the challenges that we're facing on the continent, even in our region, in the Sahel, where we've seen a lot of coups, etc. Someone like Francis Fukuyama would argue that political order requires strong institutions, but we see, for instance, in the Sahel and across the region, that these formal institutions often lack legitimacy. Even in the democracy itself, they lack legitimacy. So how do we build what, he also calls getting to Denmark, which is really those effective, accountable governance systems when we have the traditional authorities or the informal structures that kind of are still significant, in this fight between formal institutions, and they leave us almost floating at sea. Do you see that that's part of the problem? And if it is, how should we be thinking about it?
Oh, certainly. I see two challenges here. We have our own indigenous system. Systems. And then we have what is the European model or the modern model being planted on our own old system. And it's not working. I mean, let me give you an example. We have the Asantehene, the king of the Ashantis here. His empire is quite huge over here.
Yes.
People listen to him.
Yes.
You visit his palace and you see him adjudicating justice over several issues. And yet, what he does is not part of the formal process. So you have democracy being tried or being practiced by a few or by those who live in the cities, really. What the thing has boiled down to is elections form the bulk of what we call democracy. But in practice, we are all listening to our indigenous systems.
Yes.
My friend George Aite will say that, why don't we go back and look at these indigenous institutions and see if we can build on top of that, instead of all of a sudden in mid-air, we're being asked to practice democracy, which doesn't have strong foundations here.
And that's my question exactly. So if democracy feels like that foreign object that we've placed on a base, and the base keeps rejecting it, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we as social scientists be spending time to investigate those traditional informal norms, etc., that seem to hold sway over these formalized institutions that we've been trying to graft onto our skin, but the skin keeps rejecting it?
The skin is rejecting it. Yes. That would be, I would say that is the best way forward for us, because what we call democracy here is only democracy for the people who live in the cities. The people who live in the capital cities and the big places. But you go to the villages, or when it comes to an election, you see the Democrats appear and want to be elected. Once they are elected, they vanish. They don't come back until the next election. Now, that kind of system is not working well for us. What we need to do is graft what we think is democracy to our indigenous systems. And maybe we can come up with a better way. How do you have a system where a chief, for instance, a chief who takes care of 5 or 6 villages or even a village has no say in how the village is managed from the top?
Exactly.
You know, let's take a simple case of mining. Assuming we found gold in a village, and the next day, the local people, the villagers, see a foreigner in their village digging holes and trying to mine gold. Now, the chief will send people to this kind of person and say, why are you here? And all that the person has to say is, I have a concession from Accra. I have a concession from the government.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the chief, who is the caretaker for the land of the people, knows nothing about how this concession was given and whether at all there should be a concession given, and also enjoys no benefit. The people enjoy no benefit from the mining taking place there. So you know, this modern, we're trying to, as you said, graft a new form of a new system on top of an old system, and it hasn't been done well. The body keeps rejecting it. The body keeps rejecting the new part being planted on it.
Although if I play devil's advocate, you know, you'll also have some people that would argue that we've had, you know, these traditional systems in the past. They did not quite work or catch up to what you may call modernity, which meant that the foreigners could come in and, you know, colonize. You know, so what's the real strong argument for injecting them in this new system? You know, so there are arguments on both sides.
But you know, we don't have to accept everything that is being practiced by somebody else. We don't have to. The British have their system. It works well for them. Bless them. The Americans have their system. It works well for them. Bless them. We have our indigenous systems. How can we make it better for ourselves? How do we entrench our old systems or modernize it or even make it better instead of throwing the whole thing away and adopting something that cuts off our traditional leaders and even our community leaders and so on? It's not working well. Somewhere along, it's not working. And we've got to find ways. We've got to find ways of improving our indigenous systems. And if we need to add it on to what is being suggested, we have to find ways to do it. But 30-something years of practicing democracy in West Africa, there are gaps for us to fill.
And that's a good segue to my next question, which is really about the coups that we've had in recent years in the Sahel and in our neighborhood. What do you think is driving this new wave? Because we thought we were done with coups, right? What do you think is driving it? And why have they gained such acceptability in the countries where they happened and seem to be capturing the imagination of younger people who may not have experienced military regimes as we did?
Patrick, poverty is what is behind all this. Let me give you the case of French West Africa. We're from English West Africa, so let's talk about French West Africa. Now, look at Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali. Look at the extent of poverty there. Yet, these countries are some of the richest countries on earth.
Exactly.
They are some of the richest countries on earth. And yet, its people are amongst the poorest. And And what kind of situation creates this kind of poverty? Let me just try a few scenarios around you. Look at the case of Niger. It has a lot of uranium. Uranium is one of these most expensive, minerals on Earth. Yet, and the other thing is they are independent. They are considered independent. Mali is considered independent. They've gained their independence from France. They've all gained independence from France, yet they do not control any of the mineral resources underneath their feet in their own country. Now, they are always being pushed to tax more, find more tax opportunities. Yet, nobody talks about taxing uranium. Nobody says, okay, the uranium is mine. Let me go sell it and use it to look after my people. Let me sell uranium to, and use the resources, use the outcome of it to help my people. But uranium is shipped to France and other places, and the people remain poor. Won't there come a time when they will say enough is enough? The same.
And by the way, we can switch uranium for any product, and the story will be the same. In Nigeria, it'll be oil. In Ghana, it'll be gold, cocoa, oil.
So long as these things don't belong to us, they are in our countries, but they don't belong to us. Look, we have a company here called Tullow. They are oil producers.
Yes.
They tell you we can't pay this tax because they take you to court, basically, and argue why they shouldn't pay this tax. They go to the international courts. They win the cases there. They pay no tax. Then, on other occasions, they say, we're not paying tax because we didn't make enough money. I can show you some of the cases they've won. You can see them here. They say Tullow wins 320 million tax dispute against Ghana. On another case, Tullow wins something else. Tullow oil post 61 million loss. Now, you live in a country where you're mining oil and you pay no taxes and the people are poor. What do you think the people are going to do one day? They're going to get up and say, look, we can't stand this anymore. Similarly, the gold mines. You have gold mines, and remember, all these assets are owned by foreigners, from these colonial countries.
Let me try.
So long as we remain poor, people are going to get angry and people are going to attack the system. And
let me try another angle with this. So maybe the challenge we have is the way we've defined democracy. We've defined democracy the way it's worked in the West, where it was built out of their own culture, institutions, etc. One scholar who I'm beginning to really like her work is Yuan Ang. How China escaped the poverty trap, China's Gilded Age, etc. A concept that she's been pushing is what she says is how China, just liberated almost 1 billion people from poverty. And she calls it directed improvisation. So you try something, it works, you do it again. If it doesn't work, you change it. When we look at democracy, because I'm also a Democrat, I think that democracy works better than every other system we've tried, especially military rule. But it's not working for us today. Is the challenge that we haven't tried or exercised it given the realities that we face in Africa? And at the root of that, is it because we've lacked the confidence to try things? If the idea is not coming from Washington, D.C. or Brussels or London, we don't have the, we don't have the confidence to say, this is not working. We've tried it for 20 years. Let's rethink it within the general frame of democracy, but let's rethink how this could work. Do you agree with this directed improvisation? Do you agree that part of our challenge is this lack of confidence?
Oh, yes, I agree with you. And I also believe that the lack of confidence is not helping us to promote our own indigenous systems and also to speak out. We're afraid that if we speak out, it may hurt somebody somewhere. We may not get the loans that we need. The whole country has become very dependent on foreigners.
Foreign ideas, foreign loans,
and foreign institutions.
Mm-hmm.
So people are worried about speaking out because they don't want one way or the other to cross what is being pushed by some of these international agencies. They want to see democracy. The Bretton Woods organizations would like to see democracy. If you don't accept it and sing the song, very soon somebody is going to cut you off. But I think that not only democracy, but our economic institutions ought to be restructured. We need to restructure some of our institutions to fit our own indigenous circumstances and to fit our culture. Without that, it's going to be a touch and go situation. So we have a culture before democracy came here. Modern democracy came here. We have a culture, we still do. And what the European will call democracy may be different from what we call democracy, but we had freedoms within our culture. The chief does not just do whatever he wants or she wants. They're all managed by people around them. There may be some bad ones, but that's not the norm. The Asantehene has advisors around him. He doesn't have an open sesame kind of mentality. He's always hemmed in. Even what he says is managed by people around him. So we have a culture here that we can investigate and see if we can add a bit more onto what is being suggested to us from outside. But swallowing this whole concept from outside, I don't think is helping us. And people are revolting, especially when things are not working well.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about governance challenges, which the key one for me is implementation challenges. I mean, if you read any of the policies, visions, etc., that come out of any of these countries, they all look seemingly good, decent on paper, but then we face that implementation challenge. The scholar Lance Pritchett, says that there's a capacity or capability trap, that we're stuck in, where our public servants, maybe through the process that they've gotten into public office or whatever, may not be the sharpest tools in the toolkit, or the incentive system may not have, is not incentivizing them enough to actually do the work. In your view, how do we begin to bridge this implementation gap, particularly where we have this significant human capacity or human capital constraint as a binding constraint?
Ghana used to have one of the best civil service systems in West Africa. We had very good people. Then came democracy. Then came the election of, the appointment of ministers. And then ministers started saying that they can't work well with the civil service, so they needed their own technical advisors. We used to have what we call the permanent secretaries, who held on to the ministry and made sure that the system worked. Now, these guys were all thrown out, replaced by political people who were associated with their parties. And within 4 years of an election, a minister who is coming in as a party person would want to do certain things which may not be correct within the ministry, but they get their way because they bring in their own technical assistance and so on. I, for one, have always said ministers should work within the civil service and not allowed to remove who a chief director or a permanent secretary is. Because the minister's tenure is only 4 years, and is temporary. Whereas you need people who are more permanent and are more interested in the development of that particular ministry or that particular department. So, you know, I think democracy, one way or the other, is also undermining the capacity, the ability of our ministries to do well. Because here you are, you have a set ministry with a chief director or so on. And as soon as a new party comes in, the chief director is likely to be replaced because his ideas may not be in sync with the party, the new party. And as a result, you give way. That has not helped us. That has not helped us.
Yeah, how do we solve this problem, right? Because you and I identify it as a problem. In fact, the political leadership identifies it as a problem as well. Earlier this week, as part of another project we're working on, I was interviewing, former governors, and many of them complained about the same, issue. Their hands are tied with the type of appointments they make, the commissioners they appoint, the ministers they appoint. And one of them said something quite prescient, that if the people do not demand for us to do the right things, we will not do the right things. He said it in a better way, but that's the core of the story. Yes, and that got me thinking that this is really, it goes back to that Acemoglu Robinson, the narrow corridor, where they say it's the civil society organizations that will force the people in government to do the right things. The civil society organizations kind of holding in trust the will of the people, right? But what we're seeing is that the civil society, the dynamism that we saw in the civil society organizations in our fight for independence or return to democracy, I'm not seeing it today. I don't know what the situation is in Ghana, but in Nigeria, I'm not seeing it. So how else do we get the politicians to do the right things, to tell them what we want, to get them to do the right things? What is the situation with what's holding the civil societies organizations back, and how do we fix that problem?
We have this. It's a big issue here. Civil society organizations are now being divided and are considered aligned with political parties.
Which is sad.
It's very sad. And if you try to remain independent, you are considered to be against. So it's like, if you are for, you have to be for me, but you cannot be independent. But some of us have taken it upon ourselves to say, well, the country doesn't belong to one political party. It belongs to all of us. And you may not agree with the suggestions coming out of the civil society organization like the IEA, but nevertheless, it's not because we are not part of you or because we are part of somebody else. We want to be independent, and you may not like our independence, but that's fine. That's fine. So maybe how many organizations can survive being independent?
That's my question, because IEA, Institute of Economic Affairs, you can survive because of the moat you've built around yourself. You've been around for almost 40 years. You're respected both in Ghana and across the continent and outside the continent. So you can afford to be independent, right? But some of these smaller civil society organizations may still be challenged in many other ways. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How do you, from your experience, what should they be doing to preserve their independence?
It's a very difficult thing because we don't have a situation in the country where philanthropy is big. We don't have a very strong philanthropic organization, structure here where civil society organizations can benefit from non-government philanthropy. You know, all the business people are aligned to, most business people are aligned to political parties. Of course, they're business people. And instead of them also supporting philanthropy, supporting civil society, most of them don't. It's a difficult situation, very, very difficult situation for civil society organizations like institutes and in the various forms, because you need support. And once they start casting you an enemy, calling you an enemy, it becomes very difficult even for corporations to support you, because corporations don't also want to incur the wrath of government.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's, yeah. I think that's
it's a sad situation. Yeah.
That's a big question we must avert our minds to. I mean, there was an incident or an example from Nigeria where we had a newspaper that tried to be independent and do a lot of investigative journalism, Next newspaper. And even the private sector organizations will not advertise in the newspaper because they did not want to be seen as supporting the opposition. So I'm thinking if there are some thoughts of how CSOs who are listening to us, maybe some of the things that they could be doing, maybe new independent revenue sources that they could depend on.
Or maybe charging fees for workshops. People have told us here, why don't you convert part of your institute into a school to teach? And I always say the purposes are different. The purposes are different. Some people say convert it into a university, others say different ideas coming up. But it's very difficult for young civil society organizations to, first of all, to emerge and then to survive.
Yeah.
Because before you realize you have to join or be part or be seen, and you are rewarded for being seen as part of a government. They do that, and it's a difficult situation. I don't know. I don't have an answer. But we've been here 36 something years, and we're still strong. And I think that helps us because we've been here longer.
Yeah. Do you ever fear that Africa could get left behind, completely left behind, the same way you have lost tribes in the Amazon, that the world might move too far ahead and that we never catch up?
I believe so. You remember not too long ago, the Time magazine said the hopeless continent. You remember? Not too long ago, Time magazine front page says Africa, the hopeless continent. Then there've been other magazines, I think, talking about the problems of Africa. People have made, have created or built professions around Africa, criticizing Africa, beating down Africa, and Africa keeps coming back, surviving, and so on. But I remember when Time magazine said, no, The Economist, it was The Economist that said, Africa, a hopeless continent. And then another one said, a scar on the face of the earth. And the UN will hold general meetings on Africa. Glen Eagles Summit on Africa. Everybody is making a living off Africa, criticizing Africa, how we will not survive, how we will not. But Africa is bigger than what, for me, is bigger than what is being said about it. I think where is it? Is it Tom Sawyer who talks about his death has been exaggerated? his obituary has been exaggerated. I think Africa's obituary has been exaggerated and has been called on many times. The dead continent and so on. But you know, the potential of Africa is so strong that I don't think the world can do without us. What we
You reckon? You reckon that they can't?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Especially if we get our act together. And for me, getting our act together is stop giving away your critical minerals, your natural resources. Stop giving them away. Stop giving concessions. Don't give your gold to anybody. How can you have so much gold underneath you and say you're looking for foreign investment? Your gold itself is money. The dollar was backed by gold years ago. You know, gold itself is wealth. How can you have it, give it away to somebody in Europe, and then go beg for money? Go beg.
I think
we need to retool. We need to retool ourselves to be that Africa that can lead.
And also tell ourselves some hard truths, right? I think we've kind of soothed ourselves into this area of comfort and even maybe hope that, oh, the world cannot do without us. They need us for this, they need us for that. I don't know why of late I've been thinking that it's indeed possible for the world to move on completely. I mean, if you look at what's happening in AI, if you look at the kinds of monies that they're throwing into it, if you look at the capabilities that the world is building, maybe we get to a point where some of the things we thought they needed, they won't need anymore. And then, you know, if they don't need us, they don't need to extend any of these development support. They don't need to grant you any asylum. They just cut you off,
Patrick,
and then we die off.
Patrick, we don't need development support. It is us supporting the world. It's our gold that is keeping them together. It is our lithium. It is our uranium that is, look at what is happening in France today. It is the uranium from these countries that keep their lights on. You know, what we need to do is to stop giving our things away for free and let them also keep their aid. We don't need aid. Who is giving who aid? We're giving aid to Europe. You know the tons of gold that comes out of Africa.
Diamond.
And then they give and the diamonds and so on. And then they give us $5 million aid and tell you, be careful, don't spend it this way, don't spend it that way, and so on. We don't need that. Years ago, we didn't know better. But today, we know that we have more wealth. You know, these critical minerals, the lithium, other, you know, vanadium and all those things, we have them. We only need to get our act together and get good leaders. Good leaders.
Okay,
that's what we need.
And that's a difficult question, you know, that we're yet to find an answer to. But let me put an economics question on the table. The Chinese economist Ha Jun-chang, I'm not sure if you know of his work.
Yeah, I know. He's South Korean. South Korean,
yes. Argues that, you know, some of the developed countries used protectionist policies when they were developing. And now that they're developed, they're saying to Africa, you've got to open your borders, right?
Correct.
Now we look at a good friend of mine set up a solar panel manufacturing plant in the Lagos area, and he's not able to sell one panel. Why? Because Chinese panels land in Nigeria, selling price at the cost of his input price. So he's dead, right? As an economist, what's your view on African countries adopting some level of protectionism for the nascent industries until they get to a point where they're able to stand on their own?
What you're saying is is exactly what we should be doing. There's nothing wrong. Milton Friedman, the Nobel laureate, one of the heavyweights of the free market movement, he talks about nascent industries being supported. He talks about infant industries. You know, I don't know what is wrong with us, that anything is being said to us, everything is being said to us, and we don't think by ourselves. Why should we just open our doors, our borders for everything that comes in, including chicken legs, chicken tails, dog legs, everything? Why? Why? Why are we not supporting this solar manufacturer? And China would understand it because they did that and they still do. You know, we've swallowed this whole free market thing when we don't even have institutions to support free markets. We don't. You know, I think we need to wake up. We need to get to a point. And if you should ask me, what's my view? My point is that we need, African governments need to get to a point to realize that the market comes after you've developed your rudimentary, your institutions and so on. Rudimentary institutions. Otherwise, what is the use of opening your market and importing chicken feet? What's the use of it? And somebody saying that, oh, if you don't allow chicken feet to come in, the international community will be very upset. Why don't they eat their chicken feet? You know, we have to grow up to a point to say that, no, not all things we can do. We have to do what will help our economies to grow. If we don't do that, we're going to remain poor for a long time, and poverty is going to lead to what is happening in Mali, in Guinea, in Burkina, in Chad, in Niger, and it's spreading across. Where people are very poor, they're going to start rising. And there's nothing else they can do. Nothing. They don't lose anything rising because there's nothing to life except to rise.
Interesting. What's your view on state interventions? You know, so states picking industries or companies to support and make them winners. I mean, the argument is all over the place. You know, so you can look at South Korea and what they did with their chaebols at the beginning. You know, they seem to be the right thing to do, but right now it appears that they're destroying value. You know, what's your view on state interventions, and how do we do it mindful of the other issues we're dealing with in Africa? So prebendalism, corruption, you know, and so on and so forth.
I have been preaching state enterprises. Nothing wrong with them. Nothing wrong with state enterprises. China has come up this far through state enterprises. And at a point, they choose to sell, privatize on the stock exchanges, or to keep it. Korea started that way. All these countries that we're talking about that have graduated over the past 30 years or so have had strong states. The fact that a state enterprise or corporation is not doing well does not mean the concept of having a state-led approach is wrong. The state can contract private enterprise to run these things, but it should belong to the state and have the state check on them. Mining, I'll give you an example here. We have several mines whose leases are passing, are going to just expire. They've been 30 years. They've had, can you imagine, we've been giving these mining companies concessions for 30 years. Mine. Most of them will tell you we don't make any money. We don't make any money. They dump their waste in the community and so on. Now, these contracts are expiring within the next few years. Our approach is, if we cannot find indigenous miners, and we have a few of them, we should allow the state to take over and give contract to private people to mine with indicators and let them honor, have them audited, have them. But I think that the way forward for most countries that do not have the expertise to manage is to contract out to the private sector, but not to give them ownership. You give ownership away, the dividends will go outside. Let the dividends be paid here so we can use it to develop our countries.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And just to remind our audience, please put your question in the Q&A tab. I can see them there. I can't see them in the chat room, but you can keep having your conversation in the chat room. But a question for the guest, please put it in the Q&A. And I have one from Saul Chirume. He says, I concur with the concerns over how resources are being exploited or extracted, which destabilize, disenfranchise, and often displace local communities. This is an increasing issue across Africa and even Latin America. His question is, are the existing resource management systems working? If not, what are the options and where have they worked?
Well, that's a good question. And these are some of the issues we are also discussing here in Ghana and also in other countries in West Africa. You know, if we are being asked, Ghana has been to the IMF, or Ghana has been bankrupt about 17 times, where you go to the IMF to be bailed out. And in all cases, the main reason has been you don't have enough revenues, no revenues to cover your expenditures. You always have a deficit. Now, meanwhile, we have all these natural resources being concessioned out to European firms and firms from other places who claim they don't make money and they don't pay taxes. Now, and we all know that's not true. That's not true, because we have Ghanaian mining companies that will tell you we're doing well. If we're given the opportunity to mine this, we'll do well. Our suggestion is let the state participate in these companies. And where mining concession is expiring, the state should take over. If we cannot find, the state can take over and contract, give a service contract to anybody. It can be a European company, it can be a local company, but that's the way forward for us. The state should participate. The state should lead where we don't have local capital.
Interesting. I have a question from Professor Richard Joseph, who says,
I know him. Hi, Richard. Yes.
Yeah. So he says that you were at the birth of the redemocratization of Ghana.
Yes.
But what you have said about indigenous versus external political institutions have been known. Peter Eke provided the essence of your remarks with his two publics theory. And he says Rawlings would have criticized what you're now proposing about adopting Western approaches. Should we explore directed improvisation or other untried paths, but not repeat the Eke hypothesis? What's your view on this?
Hi. Okay. Hi, Richard. Good to hear from you. No, I'm not saying that we should just adopt the Western model. What I'm saying is that we should try as much as possible to find a middle way using our indigenous systems. More of our indigenous systems should be the bedrock of what is being done today. As it is, we're only practicing the Europeanized kind of democracy, and it's not delivering wealth to us. We're still poor. There should be democracy dividends. We've practiced this for about 30-something years, and we still remain poor. What kind of system can we practice? Can we adopt to help us raise the living standards of our people. And the current system is not doing that. The whole UK democracy, American democracy, completely for poor people, for native people, is not helping us. We need to find a middle somewhere.
And another participant, Chugo Ayaji, takes that question further, and she says, what actionable alternatives are there to Western democracy? How do we begin to dismantle archaic institutions when multiple installed power structures are incentivized to maintain the status quo? What will the governance transition look like, or is violence inevitable?
No, I don't think violence is inevitable. Solution is not violence. But ask, I think maybe Richard and this gentleman can come up with a way, a method to show us how can the kingdom of Ashanti and the culture and the governance of the kingdom of Ashanti, what are the lessons that we can get from there to help move our democracy forward? It's about time we start thinking about these issues. We cannot have a group of people sitting in the capital cities making laws to govern our kings and chiefs, and them not having a say in it. There's got to be a way. Otherwise, sooner or later, you are going to see people very upset and people thinking there is no salvation anywhere. And then that's also leading people to religion and all those forms of religion.
Yeah. Another question from one of my, former guests on this show, Dr. Folari Badebo-Smith. And he says, I see a problem of culture. As the book A Central Liberal Truth said, there are progress-prone cultures and progress-resistant cultures. I'm not sure I agree with that, but, for the benefit of this argument, Africans constantly outsource their responsibility. That lays them open to the exploitative contracts from foreigners. The capability gap is another thing. This discussion is missing the flexibility question. Rigidity, faith in administrative systems is a challenge. There is no investment in the civil service as negotiators. The problem is not democracy. It is the blind leading the lame. I don't know if you have any response to some of the points he raised there.
I would say that the systems we have in West Africa, or what we have adopted from the West, we have to find ways to amend and not just swallow them in sync. That's all that I can say. Nobody, every human being can learn. And we have a great system that has worked for more than 200-300 years, from the days of Mensa, Musa, and all those guys. Are we saying that we have to throw away all that culture and history and just take on to this new Western model? That is not helping us.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, there's this suggestion that wealthy nations develop through manufacturing and innovation, and not commodity exports. Yet many African countries remain commodity dependent.
Yes.
How do we get countries like Ghana, to diversify beyond gold, cocoa, and oil? And I know it's an issue that your institute has been dealing with. So the question I'm really asking is, in your engagement with public officials and in trying to explain to them this need to diversify, what are you hearing back? What are the challenges they are having with, moving forward with the idea? How are you trying to help them navigate those challenges? So essentially, they may understand the theory of it, but there's a reason why they are not diversifying the economy. What are those issues, and what are some of the ideas you're putting on the table?
You know, you mentioned gold, natural resources, and so on. Those are the low-hanging fruits. And again, Ha-Joon Chang mentions this. You know, countries that sell raw materials tend to be poor than countries that sell manufactured goods. And there's an old history around this. And I agree. We've been preaching that here. But fortunately, our leadership also recognizes that value addition is the way forward. Without adding any value to your natural resources, you're going to remain poor. And you're not going to tell the British company digging up gold and shipping gold outside to add value, because it's not yours unless you impose taxes on just that to discourage that. But I think we have to come up, and this message is cutting across all political parties here, that we need to find ways to add value to our raw materials. And so gold is not out of it. Gold should lead. Gold should lead. Our bauxite should lead. We should add value. Stop selling bauxite to Europeans to refine and sell you aluminium. Stop selling cocoa to Switzerland for them to refine cocoa and sell you chocolate. Rich countries sell chocolate, or countries that aim to be rich should be selling chocolate, not cocoa. So these are the things.
My question is, what you've said now makes sense, and anybody anywhere in the world will understand what you've just said. Why is it difficult for a government to implement this idea? You know, is it the political structure? Is it a lack of confidence? Is it lack of human capital? You know, is it the poor incentive systems? What is it that makes it difficult for Ghanaian politicians from either party, you know, to be able to take a simple idea like this and say, okay, we're going to drive investments into power so that we can power our manufacturing and then do our local processing and sell value-added products? What is it that makes it difficult for African governments to take simple ideas and implement them? And what are some of the ways you've started navigating the solution or trying to get them to understand the solution?
I think getting them to understand is the easiest part, because they all do. It's easy for them to understand. You're poor because you sell raw cocoa. If you make chocolate, you make 20 times more. You're poor because you're selling raw bauxite. If you make aluminum out of it, you make more money and you'll be better off. Question becomes self-interest. Self-interest. Who are those against this kind of movement? You know, for every policy, there are winners and gainers. Who are the potential losers if we decide not to export raw cocoa beans anymore, but to add value to our cocoa? Who are those against it? And again, the president's office will be filled with diplomats and bankers from abroad and so on, telling them cocoa is good for you. You should continue doing that. We've had an occasion where our president was visiting Switzerland, and the prime minister or the president or so of Switzerland was telling him that the cocoa, keep selling us cocoa, you produce the best cocoa in Africa, so keep selling, keep it coming. And, you know, you are told things like that. And for them, for most of them, they love it when they are being pampered. So, but the question is, who are the gainers and losers of these? If we say we're going to add value to diamonds today, who are the gainers and losers? The losers are going to do everything humanly possible to prevent you from doing that. They will be lobbying the president, convincing him, and so on. And that is what we all need to work on now. That is one example. Look, there was a study by a UK body that says about $3.5 billion worth of fish comes out of the west coast of Africa, including Nigeria, Ghana, and so on. And the fish, they're being stolen by
trawlers.
Yes, yes, yes. And yet, $3.5 billion. We go out there begging to borrow when just saving, stopping this mechanism would create a huge market in West Africa, adding value to fish, creating tuna and other things. But yet, there are the losers who will never sleep. So you're working against the tide.
So if I tie what you've just said, back to some of your earlier statements about that we did not get independence, what we got was a Trojan horse. I think you're still pointing to that fact that there are external factors that kind of make it difficult for the local leaders to do the things that are right for their people. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. The external factors are there. And that also. I've been involved in situations where the people go to the IMF and the World Bank to lobby them to tell Ghana to sell its bank, a bank that is not doing too well. And who are the buyers? They're foreign buyers. And I'm asking, okay, if you're going to privatize that bank, why don't you sell it to a Ghanaian? There's nothing wrong with privatization, but privatize to local people. Why are you privatizing everything to foreigners? You know, and somebody will say, oh, but you're preaching nationalism. But what is wrong with that? Shouldn't nationals have anything? Do you have to privatize your mines to foreigners all the time? What about us? You know? And when you look at the advantages, the foreign firms are always evading taxes or finding ways to avoid taxes. You know, we've had 68 years of independence now. There are lots of lessons to be learned. You know, if you don't add value, you remain poor. If you don't add value, you remain poor.
And the bigger, the scarier part here is that we're getting into this fourth industrial revolution that will be driven by human capital, what the mind can conceive, what the mind can get machines to do, etc. I mean, Klaus Schwab, you know, frames it as fundamentally different, you know, characterized by AI, biotech, digital platforms, etc. And the risk that the amount of capital that's going into this, the amount of capability that we're building up could really marginalize the global South, right? Have you seen conversations in Ghana, in the government circles, in private sector circles, on how Ghana can integrate itself in these discussions, look for whatever natural advantages it has to leverage that to insert itself in the conversation and ensure that we're not left behind? Are some of these conversations happening in Ghana?
Yes, yes. I've heard a few. I've heard a few in high places where government people are talking about not to be left behind with AI. That we have to start from the universities. We have to start from the universities. But I always say not only from the universities, but we also have to find practitioners and other people working in these areas to team up with. It shouldn't be a situation where we just sit there hoping that somebody is going to do that for us. You know, we need to get involved at an early stage, and that requires government lead. It requires government lead.
So are you seeing government, you know, think about policies or programs to support maybe the private sector to get involved in these conversations and help leapfrog to where the rest of the world is? Or is it still at a very high level?
It's still at a very high level where people are trying to understand. But maybe I don't know enough about this. But what I know is that the discussions have started. And it should go further than what is going on. And you know, what I think, Patrick, is, look, Ghana, Nigeria, we've been doing things together since independence. Why are we not coming together to find ways to resolve some of these issues and to tackle them. And besides, our people are friendly to each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our leaders are friendly to each other. We travel across.
Mm-hmm.
These are the two. Nigeria is the big giant on the West. Ghana can team up with Nigeria, try to overcome solar issues,
Mm-hmm.
try to overcome AI issues, try to even look at manufacturing, big manufacturing across West Africa, anchored between Ghana and Nigeria. You know, there's a lot we can do here. And fortunately, our leaders know each other. The old days were even better because we had many people coming to school here in Ghana, Achimota School, and we also had many people going to school in Nigeria. So there are a lot of people who know each other, families that cut across. But I think
it's the same. I think it's still, I mean, I have so many Ghanaian friends I went to school with, you know, we're constantly visiting each other. So I think those relationships still.
The time is now. We need a critical mass of people, and leadership should come from Ghana and Nigeria, you know. And hopefully maybe out of this could be discussions about what to do next. But AI, if we don't move fast, we're going to be the losers. We're going to be the losers. Same thing with pharmaceuticals, you know. Ghana and Nigeria, we have to work together to do these things.
I have a question from, you know, one of my partners at Nextier. He says, Ndumokolo, how do we get African leaders to gamble on development? And, you know, apologies to Stefan Deck, and, you know, than emphasizing on these issues listed by Claude Ake in his democracy and development and democracy thesis. You know, so, and Deccan's argument on, you know, gambling on development is, you know, when the government sees that, you know, it's got no other place to go, but it's got to gamble on driving development because there's a lot of competition amongst the different parties, that the only way you retain power is that the people see that you're actually driving development for them. And I guess his question is, in your engagement with the political leadership in Ghana, the economic private sector leadership in Ghana, why is it that what is really consuming everybody's mind is not how to drive development for the people, even from a selfish point of view? You know, I mean, because when we think about it, you know, I don't even mind if, you know, okay, so let me give an example. Some people will complain that Dangote became big because of government support. Yeah. My view is he's not the only person that got government support, but the fact that he's got that money today means that we're refining petroleum in Nigeria, you know, that the government could not do. He's got a massive tomato processing plant, cassava, you know, all of that stuff. Could he have been done more efficiently? Maybe yes, but he's done it. Yeah. So even if we made an argument for political leaders to play a role in, you know, the commanding heights of the economy, if it moves the dial, maybe that's what we've been talking about, you know, indigenizing our system.
Yes, but what is wrong with that? What is wrong? That has been the argument of Claude Ake and Adedeji, and this has been the fight between the developed societies of Washington, the Washington Consensus Group, and the Lagos Plan. For most of us, we want to identify our own problems and we want to solve them ourselves. We don't need Washington to tell us to cut taxes or to raise taxes or to do this and do that. I mean, that's what we've had over the years. We're all getting to a point where the question becomes, so what can we do for ourselves without them? In all these years of structural adjustment, the HIPIC and others, you've never heard of them saying that, look, But why are you giving out your oil? Why are you giving out your gold? Why are you giving out your bauxite? Nobody tells you that. We have to think that this is money we are giving away, and we should stop and identify our own path or paths and then walk our own walk. We need that. Nobody is going to develop Africa for us. They're only going to take from us. So the way forward is for us to do it by ourselves. We have to find a way to do that. And supporting Dangote, supporting other such people, that's fine. It's been done in the US. People are supporting Elon Musk. Zuckerberg was supported. All of these giants have been supported by the state, the government, and they're still being supported. So what is wrong with us identifying critical people with talents and people with ideas to support? Maybe if we had done that earlier, we would have solved most of our problems.
I have a question from Jonathan Sandy. It's a fairly long question, so let me see if I can summarize it. His question is really about investing in promoting political pluralism and multi-party democracy beyond one or two party states, which will help to strengthen political cooperation amongst different tribes, ethnic groupings, and minority groups to work together for sustainable development and poverty reduction. He gives an example from South Africa, where he says that they've got in place 3 to 4 public financing mechanisms for promoting multi-party democracies, including a democracy trust fund for strengthening the administrative and institutional capacities of political parties beyond ANC, DA, and EFF. And he thinks that this model is working. And I guess the question is, why aren't other African countries promoting this type of structure where there is political financing to promote political pluralism?
Yeah, I've seen, in fact, we have a draft bill at the IEA to government asking that political parties should be supported by the state. Hoping that maybe that could help. But this came out of the idea that people buy political parties and end up owning them. And therefore, then when they come to power, they do the bidding of the owners or the supporters. I don't know. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe this one could be a better way of doing it. But I don't know.
Interesting. So let's talk a bit about regional integration and external relations. So something like dependency theory, which is associated to scholars like Andrew Frank, argue that global structures keep peripheral countries underdeveloped. Others like Bagwati argue for export-led growth. How should we be engaging with global markets while avoiding these new forms of dependency when we also have been conditioned that we must be exporting and selling into the West? Where I'm going with this is really about the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement. Shouldn't we be talking more about this 1.4 billion, 1.5 billion market that's under our feet? And this question is really building on the back of what you said about Nigeria and Ghana cooperating. If we've got gas in Nigeria, shouldn't countries around West Africa come together and build power plants in Nigeria and then transport to use in all of these countries? Yes. Why aren't we having these kinds of conversations? And if we were to have these conversations, what would be the challenges and how do we address them?
This is very interesting. I think it has to do with leadership. But for the time being, we have the West Africa Power Pool.
Yes.
Where we've created the wires have been laid, and even pipes have been laid where gas can go both sides around West Africa. What we need to do is to do more of those. Our leaders are friends to each other. They've known each other. Why are they not coming together to do big projects across West Africa? I mean, people want to see money. We like taking money out of everything. But why don't we be Dangote and plant that money somewhere? You know, instead of taking cash and putting it in Europe or Switzerland or other places, why don't we use it to grow our sub-region? We know each other very well. You know, as you said, you have friends all across the West Coast. We have a big market. West Africa alone, if you put in Senegal, we have about 360 million people. It's a big market. And incomes are rising amongst us. So why are our leaders not coming together and push for big projects across? You know, that is what will save us.
Let's see if we can use the last 10 minutes.
Let me give you another example.
Yeah.
For instance, at one point, I know Obasanjo and Kufuor were talking about, okay, there's an aluminum smelter here. You have some bauxite there. You have energy there. Why can't we find a way to develop a power plant to feed the smelter and expand the smelter to serve the West region? Similarly, Guinea is around us. It has bauxite that would feed the whole of West Africa forever. I mean, for a long time.
Yeah.
Why are we not talking and rather have it shipped to France, have it shipped to Europe, have it shipped everywhere except West Africa? We need leaders to be talking about development, but I think that the emphasis have always been on politics. Survival. And by the time you survive, there's not much time for development.
Let me take this last few minutes and see if we can end on a more positive note. So I keep saying to you that every time I arrive in Ghana, I get a sense that it's a country that's going somewhere. You know, maybe because you live there, you don't see it, but I get that feeling from the airport. You know, I talk to people, you stay in the hotels. The people seem to be able to do simple things, you know, and here I'm comparing to Nigeria, obviously. So despite all these challenges, we see that some countries in Africa where we've seen some relative successes, you know, Rwanda will come to mind, Botswana, and I'll add Ghana there. What do you think explains these successes, and are there things that we can replicate? You know, for instance, what is it about Ghana's election that it always works, you know, even if some people may not agree, but, you know, I don't see people staying in court, you know, it kind of works. You know, what are some of the things that's led to these successes that we may be able to replicate?
Remember, we are just about 32 million people. We're just about 32 million people. Nigeria is huge.
But there's some people that are 10 million and they can't get it right. So is it really in the numbers?
Yeah, so solving problems here can be manageable. We're just about 32 million people. It's easier to manage compared to 200 million people. And you also have a bigger country and so on. But nevertheless, you know, there are lessons that we can learn across from each other. And hopefully I think we should explore that. Because we're small, our electoral processes are smaller too. You know, so it's easier to manage our situation than yours. But maybe we need more cross-fertilization. What are the things being done here that can be learned from, can be studied outside? And Rwanda is smaller. Rwanda is smaller.
Botswana
is smaller. Botswana population is about what, 3 million or less, 1.5 or so. So Nigeria is huge, and so the problems are huge.
Okay, so I mean, at the IEA, you've done this for 36 years. What keeps you hopeful? Where do you see that hope for the continent? So looking ahead to say 2030 or beyond, what gives you the most hope for Africa's development? And what keeps you most concerned? So most concerned, but also what keeps you hopeful?
Yeah, I'm hopeful when I also travel across the region and I see young people talking about technology, young people talking about the future, where they're going, what they intend to do. And so that keeps me hopeful. But I wonder, sometimes I'm like, yes, underneath all this hope, are there legs to stand on? Because the legs are the culture of the country. What does the country provide for you to stand on to jump into the future? And that is a little bit disappointing to me. And let me put it this way. Our education system is not getting better. It's getting weaker. So when I see young people with hope, I wonder if they're getting the right education, because our school system is not getting better. Something has to be done. We used to have the secondary school, sixth form, and university. Some smart people came and changed it into SSS, junior secondary school, and so on, high school. And the system is so confusing now. A person graduates from high school and needs more education to be able to do even basic tasks. We've had politicians coming in all the time saying, we're going to improve this, we're going to improve this. They come and go and nothing gets done. And our young people are being shortchanged. So looking into the future, I feel sad that our young people are not getting the education that they need to fight the bigger fights ahead of us. Yet on the other side, we have the culture, the resources, the mechanisms to make them very, very wealthy people in the future, if we can manage the current circumstances. Wealth is here in Africa. If we can get the education and the training, and then working together around the west coast of Africa, we will do very well. Yeah. We will do very well. Nobody's going to do it for us. Not the World Bank, not the IMF, not the Bretton Woods institutions. No, none of them. They're not built to help us. They're not built. They are built to keep us out of trouble. They are built to keep us out of trouble, but not to take us forward. We have to find or define our own destination and work towards that. It's not going to be done by any of them.
If you were approached by a young African leader who's just become president of their country X, knowing everything you've done in your career, both in the public space, public policy, business, etc., what would you tell this leader to prioritize? And mindful of all the challenges with implementing anything in Africa, how would you advise that they navigate to a solution in that area of priority?
I've been doing this here in Ghana with a lot of young people. And first, you need to get education is necessary. Education is necessary. But for young people, I encourage them to go into politics as well. And I tell them, you have to go into politics because you need to set the rules, to set good rules to govern the future of the country. If you don't get good leaders, to lead you, we're going to be just being at the same place 20 times, going nowhere. But I encourage people, do well, go to school, but look at politics, because the decision-making will have to be in good hands before telling them about business opportunities and so on. But I think for now, every young person wants to go into politics for the wrong reason or wrong reasons, to make money. And I tell people that shouldn't be number one. Unless we organize ourselves well, I don't know, Patrick, we'll be sitting here and we'll go nowhere. Because if look at what happens. You discover 1 billion barrels of oil in the sea.
Yeah.
And immediately you go to Europe to look for a European company to give a concession to come and mine your oil and give you a little something. Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to? You discover gold or lithium in your country, a critical mineral, very wealthy. I mean, very, very valuable mineral. You take a plane, run quick to Australia, going to look for an Australian man to come and get the concession. Why? You find gold, you forget about your own people, you quickly run to Australia, come in mind. This was done in the colonial times, when the argument was that we didn't have capital. Today, it is not so anymore. So without education, without a lot more, I don't know if it can continue like this, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Dr. Charles Mensa, thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today's episode of Development Discourse. Big ideas, important questions, real conversations. Until next time, it's Patrick Okigbo. Let's keep building that society that we want to live in. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone.